So has your football club gone forwards or backwards in the last year? Let's find out. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. As we're now in another international break, I thought we'd have a little bit of a reflection on the season so far, but we'd have a deeper dive into each championship club and compare their league position right now to where it was a year ago. As people like to say, the league table doesn't lie, so we're going to be comparing the point tally that your club had last season compared to what they've got at the moment to sort of decipher if you're heading in the right direction or not. And I thought this would make for quite interesting reading. I'd like to know from you guys in general, obviously off the pitch, on the pitch, do you feel your club is heading in the right or wrong direction? I think we'll get quite a split of answers of everyone in the comments down below on that one. And as always, if you do go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. If we could hit 300 likes, that would be massively appreciated. Check out all the links in the description down below. Planet Sport Network, you can get a 2-week free trial on there, loads of cool content, and the Patreon as well. But without any further ado, let's jump into this one. So as we're going through each championship club, I thought we'd go ahead and group all of the newly promoted clubs in together because it's a little bit unfair to be comparing their league position and point tally as they were playing in different leagues last season. But even these numbers right here make for quite interesting reading, to be honest with you, because it shows which clubs have adapted better to the level already. Now, I'm sure that all you guys would have known this so far, but amazingly so, Blackpool only have 1 point less at this stage of the season than they did in League One last season. Now, there are a couple of factors to take into consideration as to why that is the case. Blackpool in League One last season were quite a slow starter and they generally got better as the year went on. But I think, to be honest with you, you could also make similar comparisons to them so far this season. You know, they started out fairly slowly but have continued to grow into this season as it has gone along. And to have just 1 point less in the Championship than they did last season is a real testament to how they're doing at the moment. With Peterborough and Hull, it's a bit of a different story, quite the contrast between their point tally from League One, but this is what we generally expect from clubs making that step up to the next level. I think that generally what we tend to see is teams who are better structurally and defensively tend to fare better in the level above. I certainly think that's the case when championship clubs get promoted to the Premier League, and I think that's probably what we've seen here with both Hull and Peterborough. But yeah, interesting reading nonetheless. I'd still like to know from you guys, out of those three, who's surviving? I think most people have Blackpool in there, but will Hull and Peterborough do enough this season? Have they showed enough to you guys this season that you think they've got it in them? Now, with the newly relegated clubs, I've switched it up a little bit, as all these three have been in the Championship recently. This is their points difference from the last time they were playing in the Championship. So the last time each of these three sides were promoted, what's the current point difference between all of them at this stage in the Championship? Interestingly enough, Fulham have 9 more points at this stage of the season than they did when they were last promoted from the Championship. In that promotion season under Scott Parker, I think they ended up finishing 4th in the Championship, didn't they? They came down with what was a very good squad, to be honest with you. You know, they still had Mitrovic, they had like Knockout, Cavallero as their front three. It was an incredibly stacked team, but it was maybe quite an imbalanced team that did take a little bit of time to iron out their defensive issues. You know, Michael Hector, I remember coming in January, seemed to sort them out a little bit, but certainly this Fulham team that we have now this season under Marco Silva, I think is at least a level above the Fulham that we saw last time. But the same can't quite be said for West Brom and Sheffield United. West Brom currently find themselves 3rd, albeit there is a little bit of a gap which has already opened up between 3rd and the automatic places. I would say that West Brom side under Bilic last season, I did have quite a bit more about them. Obviously, they had the Pereira factor in there, which is important to take into consideration. They had Bilic as well. The football was probably night and day to what we're seeing at the moment with West Brom. So, yeah, they're the one who I'm a little bit on the fence with. But Sheffield United, clear difference in their point total. Obviously, we're going a season further back for Sheffield United in terms of the data in this one. But I think to be honest, I think most of us said that it could be a slow start this season under Jokanovic, but maybe we didn't expect it to be just as slow as it actually has been. There was one point of the season when they strung together a few wins and it looked like they were finally heading in the right direction when Morgan Gibbs-White was first introduced into that side, but defensive issues that they've had since then have really halted them moving up the league, which is yeah, quite the interesting one. Next up though, we'll go through each of the Championship clubs and we'll go from the clubs who have regressed the most in the last 12 months up to the clubs who have progressed the most in the last 12 months, and it will come as no surprise to absolutely anyone that Barnsley are coming in at the bottom of the pile with 11 points less at this stage of the season than they had in the last. Last season, they were obviously building towards something. Valérien Ismaël had just come into that side, and it was really how they ended last season, which really got them over the line into the top 6. But this season has fallen well short of those estimations. Marcus Schopp obviously no longer there, and as they're currently looking into the managerial market for that next appointment, and especially after how that game against Hull went, they need to get that next appointment spot on. Also coming in with 11 points less than they had at this stage last season is Cardiff, another club who have recently parted with their manager Mick McCarthy, and understandable to see why. That ridiculous losing streak that they went on this season, and had they fallen well short of their estimations so far this season. I think the majority of us had Cardiff in and around the top 6, albeit their squad perhaps isn't quite at the level that it was this time last season, which has also had the bearing on results, but not anywhere close to their sort of level that we thought there'd be a drop off from them so far this season. And another Championship club who's 11 points worse off at this stage of the season than they were at this point last season was Bristol City. I've forgotten just how good Bristol City were at the start of last season under Dean Holden. They'd won their first 4 matches, 17 games into the season. They were actually sat inside of the top 6, but obviously as we entered into the new year, things quickly unravelled for Dean Holden. They went on a really bad run of form, and ultimately Nigel Pearson was brought in towards the end of the season. This season for Pearson, on the whole, hasn't been particularly great, to be honest with you, from Bristol City's point of view. Apart from a couple of standout performances on the road so far, things have been pretty dry. Reading are currently 8 points worse off than they were at this stage last season, which I think most people probably would have predicted, to be honest with you. Their form last season, especially at the start of last season, was ridiculously unsustainable. It was when Lucas João was scoring with absolutely every shot on target that he had, but Paunovic was riding high on that wave, and they were top of the league up until I think November last season, weren't they, Reading? Until things ultimately unravelled and they couldn't quite keep the bar set at that ridiculous height. And this season probably has been a regression to where most people would have had Reading, albeit I think Paunovic has done an alright job so far this season, given some of the other constraints that he's had on him this season, regarding the players that he's been able to bring in and injuries as well. Swansea are 7 points worse off at this stage of the season compared to where they were last, which I think most people would have probably predicted, to be honest with you. Obviously, they went from Steve Cooper and Andre Ayew and a lot of high quality loan players to quite the turnover of players in the summer transfer window. Russell Martin coming in with a new brand of football, a new system and a new group of players was always going to take a little bit of time for things to properly get going for Swansea. I do think we've seen some positivity from them, but last season they were just very consistent. It wasn't always the most thrilling football to watch, but they only fell outside of the top 6 for 2 game weeks last season, Swansea. At Middlesbrough, there's been quite a bit happening over the last few days. Neil Warnock has obviously recently lost his job, despite only having 2 points less at this stage of the season than they did last time around, but I think that that's happened mostly because of the expectations which have risen this season at Middlesbrough. They invested quite a bit of money in the summer transfer window, and barring a few results here and there, generally the standard of football hasn't quite been at the level that I think most of us expected it to be at Borough this time around. Chris Wilder has since come in though, and I'm excited about what's to come from Borough for the rest of this season, because that middle part of the Championship is so congested. They're only 4 points off the top 6 at the moment. I wouldn't back against them having a bit of a bounce for the next month or so under Wilder. That gets them to the January window, and who knows what's possible from there. Next up then, and as the last of the Championship clubs to have less points at this stage of the season than they did last time around, it's actually my club, Preston North End, which makes for quite interesting reading, given an interview that Peter Ridsdale gave the other day in the press when he was very much talking up Preston at the moment, saying how much he thinks we've progressed in the last 12 months, when statistically we've actually gone backwards. Now, last season wasn't great for North End. It did feel quite early on, to be honest with you, with the amount of matches that we were losing, that it was going to be, you know, the start of the end for Alex Neil, really. We did pull some results out of the hat, similar to how we have done this season, to be honest with you. But once again, the mood around the camp this season doesn't feel great, and particularly after a couple of big things have happened recently, I think the general mood around the fan base at the moment certainly isn't that we're heading in the right direction. Now, there were also 2 Championship clubs who have exactly the same amount of points this season than they did at this stage last season, and the first one of those is Stoke City, and this one surprised me a little bit because I think that we've been talking quite positively about Stoke so far this season, whereas my perception on Stoke last season is vastly vastly different to my perception on Stoke this season, but I went back, looked at the results and the numbers and things like that, and Stoke at the start of last season actually were pretty good, to be honest with you. A lot of that was attributed to Tyrese Campbell, who was scoring a lot of the goals for them, and obviously the change in their season last time around really came when he picked up that injury. They went on that winless run and obviously slipped away from the top 6. So this season, now they no longer have that reliance on Campbell. In fact, he's actually getting himself back into the squad now. It's going to be fascinating to see if we do see a similar sort of fall off from Stoke, or they've learnt from those previous mistakes, which I would tend to think they have done, and we'll see a stronger end to the finish for them. But that I found really interesting, that this time last season they had exactly the same amount of points. And another club who I was really surprised to learn have the same amount of points this season that they did this time last time round was Birmingham, because my general perception of Birmingham under Aitor Karanka was they were a bit of a chore to watch, to be honest with you. It was boring, turgid football. They didn't pick up all too many results, but they actually had the same amount of points last season than they do this season under Lee Bowyer. Despite that, there is more to football than just the results, and there is context underneath that and things like that. But yeah, Lee Bowyer will be keen to avoid the curse which has certainly happened to the last few Birmingham managers, whereby the second half of the season there's just a massive drop-off in performance and results. Next up though, let's probably get into a bit of positivity and look at the sides who have improved from 1 year ago. And the first team is actually Huddersfield, who are only 1 point better off than they were at this stage last season. I thought that would have been a little bit higher. We've been talking up Huddersfield so far this season, but I did a bit of a dig into their numbers from last season, and to be honest with you, they were all right at the start of the last season under Carlos Corberán. It was really in the second half of the season when things started to unravel for them. They only won 3 matches from January onwards. I think it was on that form basis that a lot of people then predicted them to get relegated, but fair play to Carlos Corberán for really bringing it back so far this season. Another club where it was a similar sort of occurrence, where it was a good start to last season but it fell off in the second half, was Blackburn Rovers, and for that reason they're only 1 point better off at this stage than they were last time around. But I think quite a bit has improved with Blackburn, especially if we're considering the second half of last season to the first half so far of this season, considering the personnel that they lost as well. A couple of big characters in that midfield as well as Adam Armstrong. They've been pretty good so far. Luton Town, definitely a club who are heading in the right direction. They're 1 point better off than they were this stage last season. It was a bit of a squad refresh really that we've seen over Luton over the last 12 or so months. I think that if we were to compare the side that was playing now compared to 1 year ago today, there would be quite a few changes in there, to be honest with you. But yeah, apart from a couple blips here and there, Nathan Jones has been doing a really good job with this side so far. Millwall find themselves 4 points better off than they were at this stage last season. I think that's especially a testament to their recent run of form. I think that they were guilty the first chunk of this season, and especially last season, with too many draws. We brought it up a lot of times speaking about Millwall, but the recent formula that Gary Rowett has there does seem to be working. I've always held the opinion that Millwall have it in them with that personnel to be in and around the top 6, and if they continue along this current trend of improvement, who knows what's possible come the end of the year if they are in and around that conversation. Next up then we get to Derby County, who despite being bottom of the table at the moment, obviously due to that point deduction, they have actually improved quite significantly from a year ago today. Now obviously a large chunk of that will be attributed to, you know, Koku and just how useless Derby actually were at the start of last season, but I don't think that many people would have predicted this at the start of this particular season, you know, given the personnel that was lost there, the limited resources that they had and the sort of rules that they were working under in terms of bringing people in the thin squad, and the amount of youngsters that they've had to rely on so far this season. Yes, there have been a lot of draws, and probably maybe frustratingly so at times, but everything taken into consideration, you've got to say Rooney's done a really good job so far. One club who are certainly on the up at the moment and heading in the right direction is QPR. Now, it would have been quite easy for QPR last season to have maybe lost faith in Mark Warburton with how things were going in the first half of last season. Results weren't there, performances weren't particularly there, they were incredibly leaky at the back, but the turnaround from January onwards when they brought in those loan players to really reinvigorate their season, on the back of that terrific finish to the season, a lot of people backed them to be in the top 6 this season, and that's exactly where they are at the moment. A lot of praise has to be given to not just Mark Warburton, but some of the other people behind the scenes at QPR, because the last sort of decade has been such a roller coaster for that club in terms of the ups and downs, but at the moment it definitely feels like they're on that upwards trajectory. Now this next one surprised me a little bit, but Nottingham Forest have improved by 9 points this season compared to last, which just goes to show how awful they were at the start of last season. It was, I think, Stablimucci in charge of the first 4 games, which I think he was given. He lost all 4 of them. Chris Hughton came in and didn't really have much of a bounce. Their results picked up slightly, but never to the point where we thought Forest might be a bit of a force. They just sort of coasted through the rest of the season, and obviously coming into this season there was still that sort of hangover of bland football. Things under Chris Hughton clearly weren't going anywhere, and this is really a testament to how good Steve Cooper's come in and the bounce that he's had already. The fact that they've picked up 9 more points at this stage compared to last, because at the start of the season it looked like they were heading in the same direction. After that we then go to Bournemouth and to the job that Scott Parker's done so far this season. This one deserves real praise. 9 points better off than they were last season. I think you can make an argument in terms of like individually, in terms of the players that were at the club last season, you could certainly say there was maybe more talent on paper that was there. You know, they had a fully fit Lewis Cook, Dan Juma, who was absolutely brilliant, Begovic, who was one of the best goalkeepers in the league, and Scott Parker and what he's had to work with. I think they were quite savvy in the recruitment that they did, Bournemouth, over the summer transfer window. He's also put a lot of faith into the youngsters as well so far this season, and that's more than paid off so far. Bournemouth have been great, obviously just that one defeat of the season which came to North End. But the biggest improvement by quite some distance is of course Coventry, who are 12 points better off than they were at this stage last season. Now Mark Robbins has done a terrific job, and to be honest with you, even last season when the results weren't always there for Coventry, the underlying numbers and the general standard of their performances were still pretty good, to be honest with you. You know, we always had the laugh with Coventry fans last season in the Championship that they were maybe like the most unlucky side in the league because they hit the post and crossbar so much, but this season they've been significantly more clinical. Obviously their home record has picked up tenfold compared to when they were playing their games at Birmingham last season, and Coventry is just a club who has that real buzz about them at the moment, and I think that's epitomised by them having that ground back at the moment. So yeah, long may it continue for Coventry. It's good to have a bit of an underdog up there. But guys, there we have it. There was every Championship club and if they've improved or not compared to where they were last season. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this one down below. Obviously the league table and points tally doesn't tell us completely everything, so I want to know from you guys, do you think the mood generally around your club is at a better place now than it was last season, or do you think you're heading in the opposite direction? Apart from that though guys, that will wrap it up for today's video. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do subscribe for some regular Championship content. Apart from that though, I'll see you all in the next one.